It's 2 a.m. in a quiet town far from the buzzing skyscrapers of Silicon Valley. The world is asleep, unaware of the storm that's brewing, inching its way toward a global giant, a corporation worth billions. But this storm isn't being stirred by stock market crashes or scandalous headlines. No, it's a storm of data. A storm that starts with a single keystroke. And that keystroke? It's being typed by someone you'd never expect, a nameless, faceless hacker, someone who could be your neighbor, your co-worker, or the person sitting next to you in a coffee shop. Someone so ordinary, yet capable of bringing a corporation to its knees. In a world obsessed with fame, power, and influence, how could someone so unknown manage to infiltrate one of the biggest companies on the planet? How could they pull off the impossible? Not with a vast army or a multi-million-dollar budget, but from a small bedroom in the silence of the night. This is the story of how an unknown hacker took down a global corporation from his bedroom. Our story begins not in a boardroom or a corporate headquarters, but in the dim glow of a screen, in a room that could belong to anyone. He wasn't a hacker by trade, didn't have a high-tech lab or sophisticated equipment. He wasn't recruited by any shadowy organization. He was just a kid who had learned how to manipulate the system, not for money, but for something deeper, more personal, for the thrill, for justice. You see, the hacker, let's call him Ryan for now, wasn't some master criminal. He didn't have a dark past or a vendetta against the world. He was just a tech enthusiast, obsessed with puzzles and the thrill of cracking codes. The type of person who spends hours inside their room, trying to solve problems others never even think about. But there was something else, something personal. He wasn't just interested in hacking for fun. There was a fire inside him, a fire fueled by watching the world grow more and more divided, more and more controlled by the corporations that seemed to have all the power. The company Ryan targeted, a name many of us know, a corporation that controlled an entire market. It was a tech giant, a player in the global arena. It was everywhere, in our phones, our homes, our lives. But behind its polished exterior, it hid secrets, dirty secrets. Ryan had stumbled upon one of those secrets. It wasn't something you'd see on a news channel. It wasn't a scandal that would make headlines. It was far more subtle. But it was enough for Ryan to see the cracks in the system, the kind that, when exploited, could shake the very foundations of this massive corporation. The company had been taking advantage of its customers for years, masking it with shiny advertisements and empty promises. They weren't just selling products, they were selling data, your data, mine. They were harvesting information from millions of unsuspecting people, manipulating them into spending more, living less freely. Ryan knew this, and it angered him. He didn't want to just be another person who complained about it. He didn't want to sit on the sidelines, typing angry tweets into the void. No, Ryan decided to do something no one would expect. He began small. A simple intrusion here, a weak spot in the code there. He dug through public-facing databases, finding forgotten vulnerabilities. Every line of code he examined was a potential door waiting to be unlocked. And with every discovery, he grew more determined. The company's security, a fortress on the surface. But like any fortress, there were cracks, and Ryan had found them. For months, he chipped away at the walls, unnoticed. The company didn't see him coming, but Ryan was methodical, patient. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't trying to show off. He was playing a long game, but then, one night, it happened. Ryan had been toying with the company's infrastructure, studying the way their servers communicated with each other. He'd figured out their weak points, the ones they thought were secure, and then, with one final keystroke, he did it. He bypassed the entire security system, like slipping past a locked door with a skeleton key. And then, the impossible occurred. In the blink of an eye, Ryan had access to everything. Every file, every password, every document that the corporation had tried to hide. For a moment, Ryan sat there, staring at the screen, realizing the enormity of what he had just done. He hadn't just hacked into a server. He had infiltrated the heart of a global corporation, the thing everyone had thought was untouchable. But the question now wasn't what he could do with all this power. The question was, what would he do next? Ryan didn't just want to expose the company. He wanted to make them feel the weight of their actions. He wanted them to understand that no one is invincible, that no amount of money or influence could shield them from the truth. So he did something no one expected. Instead of just leaking the files or launching a public attack, Ryan went straight to the company's leadership. He gave them an ultimatum: change or face the consequences. But here's the twist. No one knew who he was. They didn't know where he came from, who he was working with, or even what he looked like. Ryan remained in the shadows, a ghost. And that was the moment the corporation realized they had been exposed, not just by any hacker, but by someone who understood the system better than they did. They thought they were untouchable, but in the end, it wasn't their money or their security systems that failed them. It was their hubris. In the end, the company had no choice but to comply. They had to admit their wrongdoings, to apologize to the very customers they had exploited for years. And as for Ryan, he disappeared. No headlines, no fame, just silence. His identity, still a mystery. In a world dominated by flashy tech billionaires and corporate moguls, Ryan, the unknown hacker, took down a giant from his bedroom, and the rest of us, we're left to wonder. How many more Ryans are out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to make their move? The question is no longer if we can be hacked. The question is, are we aware of the systems that are hacking us every day? Ryan didn't have the luxury of fame, not even the recognition of a hero. He didn't want that. You see, for him, this wasn't about praise. It wasn't about being on the front page of news outlets or seeing his name in lights. For Ryan, it was about one thing: justice. The real power behind Ryan's actions was the quiet conviction that what he was doing mattered. He wasn't a kid out for attention. He wasn't in it for a payday or a rush. No, Ryan was fed up with seeing the same stories, the same people getting away with it. The companies that exploit the masses, the systems that profit off of their silence. His own life hadn't been easy. He grew up in a small town, surrounded by ordinary people, people who worked hard and got little in return. He saw his friends, his family, struggling to make ends meet, while the tech giants and their high-rise towers seemed to grow taller by the day. The more Ryan learned about the inner workings of these corporations, the more disgusted he became. They weren't just businesses. They were empires, built on the sweat and data of everyday people. When Ryan hacked into that corporation's systems, he wasn't just exploiting a weakness. He was exploiting a broken system, a system that had gotten so big, so powerful, that it started to think it was untouchable. For weeks after he made his move, Ryan watched. He watched the company squirm in their own panic. He knew they were clueless. Every email, every call, every conversation behind those closed doors, they were scrambling to figure out what had happened. And then Ryan did something most hackers would never consider. He offered them a way out. He sent them a message, a simple message that would change everything. He didn't demand money. He didn't threaten to destroy everything they held dear. Instead, Ryan gave them an option. Come clean. Make things right. Fix the holes in your systems and return to the people what you took, or face the consequences. Imagine the shock in that boardroom. Imagine the powerlessness that those corporate giants felt when they realized they had been completely exposed. But what was even more terrifying, they couldn't stop it. Not because they didn't have the resources, but because they didn't understand how this had happened in the first place. They were caught in their own arrogance, believing they were too big to fail, and that's when the company realized something important. They hadn't been defeated by a group of hackers or a rival corporation. They'd been taken down by one person, a lone individual who had the audacity to challenge them. Ryan didn't just expose their secrets. He exposed a much larger flaw in the system, a flaw that had been growing in the shadows for years. Ryan didn't have access to limitless resources. He didn't have an army of experts working with him. He didn't have the flashy equipment or the billionaire investors. But what he did have was something much more powerful: patience, intelligence, and a relentless desire to see right prevail. What if everyone had the same power? What if every person who felt disillusioned, helpless, or insignificant could make their voice heard in the way Ryan did? What if everyone could hack the system? Ryan's story is one of the quietest forms of rebellion. He didn't need an army. He didn't need a platform. He didn't need a megaphone. All he needed was a computer, a belief in fairness, and a refusal to let the system continue unchecked. But as his name remained hidden, as the media churned through headlines without a face to match the story, something began to shift. Not in the company, not in the headlines, but in the people who watched this story unfold. People began to ask, who is this hacker? Where did he come from? But more importantly, who else is out there? The most chilling part of this story: Ryan may not have been the only one. We live in a world of endless data, a world where systems are designed to be opaque, where the powerful pull the strings behind closed doors. There are cracks everywhere, and behind those cracks, there are people like Ryan, waiting, watching, learning. They're out there. They've been watching how we've been treated, how companies have manipulated and profited from us, and sooner or later another Ryan will appear, another quiet rebel, another unknown person in a small bedroom with the power to change everything. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when that next person comes, will we be ready? Will the corporations, the governments, the systems that control our lives be prepared for another unknown hacker to take them down from the inside? The truth is, we're all part of the system. We all feed into it, whether we know it or not. Every click, every swipe, every piece of data we share is fuel for the machine. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we all start asking ourselves, what happens when the machine finally breaks? What happens when the cracks become too big to ignore? For now, Ryan's story remains just that, a story. A story of how an unknown hacker took down a global corporation from his bedroom. But maybe it's also a story of what we all could become. Maybe it's time to start looking for the cracks.